uh, Agile is a popular buzzword, I guess, for lack of a better word, in business these days. And Jeff is one of those experts. So to join us and talk about his experience, how he got there, and where he's going, and how we can join along. So Jeff, I don't know if you have a slide deck to share. I assume.
Yeah, I do.
So I'll take this down. I think everybody had a chance to look at it. So
yeah, thanks, Renee. So I will share my screen here. So a few things to talk about today. So we're going to talk about a little bit of what is Agile. And it's a philosophy and a mindset. It's not a cookbook or a recipe on how to do some things. We'll talk about some skills that go along with Agile roles in general and what's most common in the market. And then certifications. So a little bit more, and we, happy to field some questions around the value of certifications or anything that comes up around there. A little bit more on my background. So I started off, I've been mostly in software. Didn't take me very long in my career to figure out that I wasn't that good at writing code. And so I moved more into project management and spent about 10 years doing what we now refer to as waterfall or traditional project management, where you have like these big projects that have a design phase, and then you develop stuff, and then you test stuff, and then you figure out everything you didn't do right the first time. And so you do it again. And 6 months later, everyone's unhappy, and you release something, and you figure out that you're going to do it better the next time by learning some things. And lather, rinse, repeat. It generally turned out the same way. So about 10 years ago, I dipped my toe into this Agile thing, tried to figure out what was going on there. I had a role my first role as a Scrum Master, which I did get certified for, and then I got the role and advanced from there. What I do now is I do a lot of coaching for organizations. I train people on Agile and Scrum, and really, I've got a lot of passion for it as someone who went through the pain of that waterfall type of project management. I guess you could say I kind of found religion through Agile development. So let's get into it. What is Agile? I mentioned it is a philosophy. It's this idea of the way you approach work that you're going to be learning as you go. And you want to be adaptive. One interesting little note. So in 2001, the Agile Manifesto was created, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But these guys who were all in the software world got together and tried to figure some commonalities of their own individual different ways that they were approaching software development. And they coined this term Agile, with the idea being, having organizations that can change quickly. And it's become a buzzword, like Renee mentioned. I think the mindset, if you think about being adaptive, so how do you as a team be adaptive? How do you as an organization be adaptive? That's really what we're getting at. So, I always coach people on this, that don't think about what does Agile tell me I should do. It's more like, what do I know I need to do to be adaptive and respond to change? It relates to empiricism. So the idea with empiricism is that we don't know everything when we start. And so there are certain processes out there, automobile manufacturing, as an example there on the left, where you do know everything at the start, right? You're gonna get some inputs and you're gonna cast them all in the same way. And you're gonna have these robotics do certain things to them. And at the end, you got a car, and there might be a little bit of variability in some of the pieces that are put together, but on the whole, it's exactly what you thought it was going to be. Empiricism is more around you're learning as you go. So it's that scientist mode where you have certain assumptions, you make some hypotheses, you might put some estimates together, but what you know most about those estimates is that they're wrong, you just don't know how wrong. And so you learn as you go, and you want to be responding to change quickly as you go and as you learn. So getting a little bit more into empiricism, there's three pillars of empiricism. So at the foundation, you need to have transparency. If you're going to be inspecting and adapting what's going on, you need to be transparent at what you're looking at, or you're going to be making the wrong adaptations based on the wrong inspections. I think it's probably a topic I don't want to wade too deeply into, but we have in our politics right now different versions of what truth is, right? And so two very reasonable people can be inspecting what they think the truth is and come up with very different adaptations because we don't have a common definition of what truth is sometimes. Fortunately, in most work environments, that's easier to solve than it is in our political discourse, but it's not totally easy, right? You need to have a lot of openness, a lot of honesty, a lot of people being vulnerable and really being honest of the current state of things to have true transparency. And so these agile methods, we'll talk a little bit about Scrum later, really require that. And so you can make the right inspections, the right adaptations. So I mentioned the Agile Manifesto before. This started, like I mentioned, in the software world, and there were a lot of new ways of working in software in the 1990s that were getting beyond this whole waterfall idea that I mentioned. And so, the conference in 2001, they came together and they came up with these value statements that we value individuals and interactions, so basically people, over processes and tools. We value working software, and I would substitute the word product for software because this has gone much bigger than software now. But we value something working over documentation that describes it. We value our customer collaboration over a contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. Responding to change over following a plan is really the core of Agile. And the bottom statement there as the caveat to, kind of calm the nerves of people and organizations that get freaked out, but there is value in the things on the right. But we value the things on the left more. I worked in a group that was a medical device development company, and they were working on a product that was this catheter that goes in your hip, and it goes up and has this magnetic thing that gives like a 3D rendering of what the heart looks like. Don't ask me how in the world they figured this stuff out, but it was really cool. They needed documentation. You can't get this stuff approved by the FDA without documentation. But it was more important that they had something that worked and that didn't harm people. And so that's kind of an extreme example. But the idea here is, as a customer perspective, I'd rather have a working product than something that has a great user manual. So that's the idea there. There's a set of principles that goes along with it. I'm not going to go through this in detail because we have 20 minutes and I don't want to put you to sleep. But if this stuff is interesting to you, those principles are what a lot of those other methods like Scrum, rely back on. So it's definitely worth looking at. I'll also note that the image on here is exactly from the website that you see on there, the agilemanifesto.org. So they left it stamped in time what a 2001 website looks like, and you have that funky image in the background. But if you want to check it out, learn more about the Agile Manifesto, you can do it there. So I mentioned Agile as this overarching philosophy. We like to talk about the Agile umbrella as a good metaphor for Agile. So underneath this umbrella, we have a lot of different ways that describe how you can put together a process that embraces the Agile philosophy. The things I just told you about, that's pretty much what Agile is, right? So from that, you can't gauge, how do I do this? It's a philosophy, but Scrum describes a way of doing work in an Agile way. Kanban, the same thing. You can see a list of other methods that you may have seen before in there. But that's, that overarching thing about Agile. It's this broad idea of being responsive, those value statements in the manifesto. I'll pause here for a second to see if there's any questions before I move on to the skills that are needed. All right, I will move on. And of course, there will be time at the end for questions as well. So in the skills section here, I'm really going to focus on roles related to Scrum. They used to be called roles, now they're called accountabilities, which is a little bit confusing, but there are basically 3 roles in Scrum. I'll walk through them here, and they make up the Scrum team. The first one is the person who figures out what to do. What are the important things from the customer's perspective, and how do I want to order them? That's the product owner role. So, thinking through what those kinds of things are, you need to be an expert in whatever domain you're working in. So the cool thing about being a product owner is you're not the boss of any people, but you're the boss of the product. You're the boss of what direction are we going to be going with this thing. So a product owner should have independent authority on where the product is going, what the most important things are to do next. They're working on the scope, figuring out what to do, and deciding when we release something. One thing, in Scrum, there's something called sprints, which a sprint is basically just a short period of time that you're going to be working on certain functions, certain set of scope. In short, the longest period of time a sprint can be is a month, and they're typically 2 weeks. And so you go from idea to something that works in 2 weeks. And in software today, a lot faster than that. We're putting things in the middle. I have teams that are doing a 2-week sprint, but they're releasing every day something that goes out into the real world. So, but it's a product owner's job to say, yeah, let's go ahead and put this thing in production. I want to give this to the user community now. So they have some responsibilities, setting the product vision, where are we going with this product, getting funding, figuring out the priorities, maximizing the value of the product and also the developers. It's kind of a funky statement there because they're not telling the developers how to do their job, but they're trying to, because they're focused on the product and doing the things that are most valuable for the product, the developers are also doing things that are most valuable. And representing the stakeholders. A product owner is a tough job because you are not only figuring out what to do next and working with the development team every single day as they have questions and clarifications, but you're also working with this broader stakeholder community. So could be the CEO, it could be your customers, it could be your sales reps, it could be anyone in that sphere where you're taking input and figuring out how to use it in determining the direction of the product. So the next role is the Scrum Master. If you haven't heard that before, it's kind of a funky name, but it's there because they are the master of the Scrum process. That's their job, is to enforce the Scrum process. Rights that they have, they're working with the developers, they're working with the product owner, they're working with the larger organization, so they understand Scrum. And they get to experiment with new ideas. If they have a new trick they want to try to get good feedback out from the team on how to improve their own processes, there's a fair amount of flexibility there. They should have access to decision makers and stakeholders. They should be communicating how Scrum works to this larger group, how empiricism works to this larger group, why the old way of working isn't the best. They are kind of a counselor. So the Scrum Master is not a new word for project manager. They're totally different roles, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. But a lot of what the Scrum Master doing is they have to know Scrum, they have to know people, they have to have a high emotional intelligence quotient, figure out how to get a team to work really well together. On the right side there, the second bullets, they're neutral. So they're a facilitator. They're not the boss. They generally don't have any direct reports. The developers definitely don't report to them because the idea with Scrum is that the developers are kind of this self-managed group. They figure out how to work better, and the Scrum Master is there just to provide them space and manage the Scrum framework to help them do that. And leading through influence, this concept of being a servant leader, where you are serving at the pleasure of the developers. They are not serving you as a leader. I'm not going to pretend that I understand the military very well. I don't have a lot of experience, although my son is in the National Guard and currently deployed in the Middle East. So I've had a couple of years of one level of abstraction. But it's interesting because I think of him, and especially as a new private joining, he had to find out some information that to me is like, oh, go ask the person. Well, that person was at so a rank that he was afraid to go and ask the question. He would not have been a good Scrum Master in that situation. So again, it's you need to break down barriers, not respect them as a Scrum Master. So it's an interesting role. The third role in Scrum is the developers. These are the people who are taking ideas and turning them into something real. And the word developer isn't confined to software developer. So even in the software world, this is software developers, it's software testers, it's people who do user experience design, it's people who do data science. You get out of software, you could have a team of people doing in a marketing group. Scrum would call them all developers because they're taking some ideas and turning them into something real, even if it's a marketing concept and not software. Couple of principles. Remember, there were those 12 principles that I didn't walk you through, but a couple of them related to developers. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. And then working software is a primary measure of progress. Again, you can substitute the word product for software and it means the same thing. The idea here, and going back to my old project management days, we had something called earned value, which was awful. But the idea is that you're measuring progress on this 9-month-long project by carving it up into small pieces. Sounds like a good idea, right? The problem is some of those small pieces are like a design document, a testing plan. And if I get my design document signed off by whatever people have to sign it off 7 months before I'm going to release something, I get credit for that. We're 3% done with our project now because I got this document signed off. Agile throws that on its head. It says that we don't get credit for anything unless it works. And so, the same project, we would be developing our product right at the beginning. We don't have a design phase. We start developing things and we're 3% done when we have 3% of the real functionality complete and either in production or ready to release to production. So it's a totally different way of working. And it makes us not think about earned value, which I appreciate very much. So the developer skills, number one most important thing for developers is to be internally self-motivated. And people generally are when they're not squashed by management and made to not be motivated. And so the idea here is that these teams, these developers, they're managing how they work. That has this positive reinforcement loop with motivation. And they have a responsibility and a right to create quality work. The people doing the work are the ones who estimate the work. So the old world that I worked in, we would take a senior person who knows a lot about software development. They would go provide all the estimates, and then other people would have to actually create the product, which was fundamentally flawed because they had no investment in those numbers. They weren't as skilled as the person who gave the estimates, and everything took longer, even when we put a fudge factor on it. One weird thing about Scrum is that every one of those sprints I talked about, those small periods of time where the work is being done, the developers self-select the work. So they have a conversation at the beginning of the sprint with the product owner, and product owner saying, these are the most important things to do. In the next sprint, I want you to get this big thing done. And the developer's like, sounds great. Okay, we can pull in this, we can pull in this, we can pull in this. You get to a certain point, they're like, we're full. We can't do anymore. And the product owner, the CEO, it doesn't matter who, they would say, hey, you guys need to do more. It's like, nope, we're full. We've estimated it. We know more about this than anyone else. We can't do more. And so that's one of the real key things with Scrum is that reinforces the self-management of teams and also a sustainable pace. so we don't get the burnout cycles that we are traditionally used to in the work environment. Responsibilities of developers. The most important one is the first bullet there. Produce a potentially releasable product increment each sprint. What does that mean? It means they created something that's done. Not done except we need to test it. Not done except we need to document it. It's done. It's ready to go. And they're doing that every sprint. I mentioned that they're sizing the work. They're also responsible for their processes. So Scrum is a framework. We could like to compare it to a game of chess where there's certain rules, certain pieces move in certain directions. You can't break those rules, but there's a whole lot of creativity that actually happens within a chess match. Scrum's kind of like that. There are certain rules you need to follow, and the Scrum Master is going to make sure that happens. But within that, there's a lot of flexibility for how the developers work, and they're responsible for figuring that out. And that's, again, I keep using the term self-managed team, and that's one of the key aspects for those developers. The last one here I'll quickly touch on: implementing action items from retrospectives. At the end of every sprint, the developers the whole team, the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the developers have a retrospective. They talk about what went well in the last sprints, what didn't, what do we want to change going forward to our process. And so they have a responsibility to actually act on those items. They don't get to just complain and say, yeah, we should be doing these things differently, and then not do it. They actually have to do it. So big picture, again, I mentioned that there is no project manager in Scrum. I'm going to put an asterisk on this in a minute, but before I go there, you can see that the traditional project management functions, they're listed down the left. They're divided up among product owner, development team, and Scrum Master. And you can see the majority of them fall on the product owner. There are some of them where there's cooperation from the development team, and only a couple where the Scrum Master gets involved. So the Scrum Master is not reporting status, not taking notes, not doing all that stuff that a project manager often does. They have a different role. I will say that I've spent probably 6 years of consulting being a program manager in Agile worlds. The difference with project management and program management is program management, you're coordinating a bunch of different teams. At that level, it doesn't really matter how those teams are working. I'm not involved. I'm kind of over the top to just coordinate milestones and when you guys can be done with certain things and make sure that they're happening in a coordinated fashion. And so, each one of those teams could be working in Scrum. Another one could be Kanban. Another one could be a waterfall process. But I'm kind of, as a program manager, over the top of that. So again, there are no project managers and program managers in Scrum, but that role does not go away in companies that use Agile. All right, finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about certifications. And I'm focusing here on Scrum because Scrum is the most prevalent in the market of the Agile methods. And it's where you just see a lot more openings. So I'm going to walk you through 3 different ways of getting certified, different companies that provide certification. The Scrum Alliance, they're the Coca-Cola. They're the ones that there are more CSMs, they're certified Scrum Master, than any other company. So they're in the market, there's a lot of them. And they have a path as you kind of go down the vertical there, where you can be an advanced CSM, CSP-SM for their higher levels. There's different levels of it. And again, the product owner. So the way to get this certification is they have a 2-day class for Scrum Master, followed by an exam that is it's not terribly challenging of an exam, and then you have your CSM. Similarly, the Certified Scrum Product Owner, or CSPO, 2-day class, no test following that one. You just have to take the class, and the instructor has to vouch for you that you were engaged, and then you have your Certified Scrum Product Owner certification. The Pepsi version is scrum.org. It's kind of funny. I won't go into a whole lot of details, but there were two guys who started Scrum, Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland. They worked together and with a larger group to create the Scrum Alliance. At certain points in time, the two of them got disillusioned with the larger Scrum Alliance and created their own things. So scrum.org is Ken Schwaber's thing that's been out there, I want to say since like 2013 or something like that. But he has a different certifications, the PSM, Professional Scrum Master, and the PSPO. For these, you don't have to take a class. You just have to pass a test. However, it's kind of hard to go in cold and pass the test if you don't have some background. But the test is like $150. I think that's for both of them. I'm not 100% sure on that. And then you don't see it on here, but they have level 1, 2, and 3 for each one of those. So there is a certification progression there as well. They are both, the Scrum Alliance and scrum.org, I think equally recognized in the industry. I don't think there's one that's better than the other. My impression is that, and just from sitting in on both of the classes, the Scrum Alliance version is really 2 days on Scrum. And so they get fairly deep into the ceremonies and all that. The scrum.org version is less time on Scrum itself and allowing more time on how you actually make this real at a company. So there's a more of a kind of a practical aspect that they go a little bit deeper into. Again, I think they're both good. And I don't think, if a company is looking for Scrum Master certification, I don't think they would take one candidate and reject another just because they've got a different set of initials with their certification. Finally, my Dr. Pepper Cherry Zero Sugar option is, I mentioned that the scrum.org is, you just have to take the test. My company, Agility IRL, just make that easy to remember, it's agilityinreallife.com. We offer a free 4-hour online self-directed class for people who are in job transition or in job seeking mode. So we generally offer it for a couple $100, but for just send me an email if you're in job transition and looking to take it, and I'll hook you up with a free copy. I haven't had anyone go this route yet because I just came up with the idea last week. But I think it would actually work really well if you're interested to take that 4-hour class, go out to the scrum.org website and do some of their self-study materials, and then take the $150 exam. I think you would do really well on it. So that's, again, another option to get certified, kind of a customized way of going about that. So, and that's what I have. What questions do you have?
Hi, Jeff. My name's Jeff too, so it'll be easy.
Excellent.
I come from more manufacturing background, mechanical and manufacturing. Worked 11 years at Bosch, and then I moved into project management, into installations of security equipment and so on. So I have a little taste of the software, that kind of integration side of things, but my comfort level's in the manufacturing. So does Scrum work well in that? I only hear Scrum Master, Agile, all that. They talk about that, and they're talking about integrations and software a lot. And so I don't know, is it getting popular in manufacturing, or is it popular there?
I know it exists there. I haven't worked a lot there. There are some people who like focus on Scrum for hardware. It's different, right? Because you actually have physical things that have to change, and it's a lot easier to move bits and bytes around. So yeah, I think, it works well in environments where you're learning as you go. And so based on, how much time it takes to like put together a prototype and do some analysis and get some information, you may not be able to do 1 week sprints, but maybe you can do 1 month sprints. And so, yeah, I think the learning is built in, but yeah, it depends on the context. Again, if you're just, popping out the same thing over and over again, and you don't need to learn as you're going, it's not the right solution.
Hey, Jeff Wells, we had to deal with that over at MTS a lot. And Jeff Lee is absolutely right. Once you start bending metal, your ability to make rapid changes becomes, a lot more limited. A lot of times what you'll see on the manufacturing side, especially if there's a software integration portion or like a control software or a test and analysis software portion of your manufacturing, that may be going on an agile development cycle. And so if you're interested in that, like what I did when I was over the manufacturing side was I stayed very closely involved with that. So I was familiar with the cycle. So when I made my transition from MTS to Improbable, I was able to quickly pick up all the concepts and then start executing.
This is Mike too. I thought, is Kanban for manufacturing part of Agile?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, it could be. So the idea with Kanban is that you're managing, well, it really is, I guess, you're managing work in progress and limiting your work in progress and looking for bottlenecks in your process. And so, the idea is you've got a board and you're seeing how things are progressing through your flow. And you put, a maximum number at different steps in the flow. So if you get 6 items that are all in the same step, you can't put a 7th in there, and we have to deal with these 6. And so it's all about flow, getting things through. It came out of, Japanese automobile manufacturing kind of post World War II. So yeah, it definitely has a manufacturing origin.
Well, Six Sigma does as well, has a lot of, lean process engineering and so on. So I know that a little of Six Sigma in there, but the Kanban too, I briefly knew a little of that. So.
Yeah, and manufacturing might be something to look into. I know that the Scrum Alliance and the Scrum.org, I believe, both have Kanban certification as well. I'm not as well versed in that area.
Well, I have to say the Scrum interests me way more. I'm much more interested in Scrum. It's just the background that I have, I don't know how well fitted it is. So I'm going to look more. I actually would like to meet with you offline sometime. So
I'd be happy to.
Meeting.
Great. I see Patrick has a question. What Scrum management software is the gold standard? I don't think there is one. Jira is the most popular out there. The thing I like best about Jira is that it comes with a wiki called Confluence. That's fantastic and makes up for all the things I hate about Jira. I'm not a big fan of Jira. There are other ones that, there's Azure DevOps, Microsoft has assumed that's pretty good. There's one called version 1, which I don't know why you would call something version 1. I don't know what version they are on right now, but there's a few others. Rally's another one that's pretty well known. Yeah, I don't think there's one that necessarily is a go-to, and I don't know that as a Scrum Master, developer, product owner, that it's important to have any experience in any one going into an environment. You can pick it up pretty quickly.
So Jeff Lee, if your presentation has sparked some interest for some folks, if I was interested, how would I know if I would be actually good at one of these roles?
Yeah, I guess I'd be happy to have a conversation with anyone. So definitely reach out. I think, as a Scrum Master, I mentioned, a Scrum Master is not a task master. They are the master psychologists. They're a coach. They are an evangelist. You have to work different levels in the organization to really be effective. The product owner is more about, it's that stakeholder management. It's getting a lot of input, but focus on the product. And there's where it's more about the domain that you're in, right? Like I've worked, I mentioned that I've been in the medical device world. I would have been a terrible product owner because I don't know what the hell they're doing. But the same thing I've worked in, I've worked on the Best Buy website. I've worked, right now I'm working with a grocery delivery company. I understand Scrum. And as a Scrum Master, you can take that to any industry. It's about the people and the process. That is where your skill set is.
There is at least one person on this call tonight who finished some certification and is looking for a Scrum Master role. And I won't call out their name, but they know who they
Thanks,
are.
Renee.
So congratulations, Tiffany, on completing that coursework. And you know, maybe hit Jeff up to see what his suggestions are for your next steps.
Oh, and actually that brings up a point I should have brought up in the presentation, but we have an event coming up. I think it's either next week or early the following week. That's how do you get a Scrum Master job? And it's a panel, like a 1 hour thing. I don't know the date exactly because I'm not going to be there. I'm going to be in Boundary Waters, but we've got a really good panel of someone who's found a number of Scrum Master jobs, someone from the HR hiring side, someone from the who leads a group of Scrum Masters. And so I think, again, agilityirl.com. Let me actually make sure that we have that easily accessible.
Yeah, that'd be great. Or if you have another contact at the company that I can reach out to for more information, I can post that. We have a group chat thing in LinkedIn, and I can post that for everyone's benefit.
Yeah, sounds good. I will. I'll get you the link to that. I don't see it as prominent on the website as we probably should have it. So.
Other questions, anyone? Aaron?
Yeah, I've got a question. Hey, Jeff, just out of curiosity, your son being deployed overseas for a year, how has he navigated a civilian job and stuff? What does he do exactly on the civilian side then?
Yeah, so he's 21 years old, and he's so he's a college student. To be completely frank, this is kind of hitting me at a good point in his life to figure out what do I want to do in my 20s, because you know, college has been a fun adventure, but I don't know if it's the right adventure for him. So I guess I'll have to get back to you on that one, see how things come when he comes back. He went over this spring. I guess he gets back next April-ish. So
okay, all right. And then actually, so I was just looking at your LinkedIn here. You've been on a number of contracts. How have you navigated contracts? Because I'm looking at a number of contract roles too. Did you work with a staffing firm that helped place you at all of those, or what was your contract journey like?
Yeah, so I was fortunate in that I started my career at a large consulting company that turned into a small consulting company when kind of the .com burst happened in the late 90s. And so all these people that I knew got farmed out to all these different companies in the Twin Cities. And so I've got contacts everywhere. So I have been pretty lucky in being able to just kind of hit my network and find things, which is great because as a consultant, you can get a better rate if there's not someone taking 20% out of it or more as a middleman. The catch with that is you have to do a little bit more of your own kind of things on the tax side. It's, setting up an S corp. Those kinds of things are generally helpful to the bottom line, but can be a pain in the butt. Not everyone wants to do it. I think going through some of the staffing firms is the way most people go. Again, they have their tentacles out everywhere. And so I think that's a very reasonable way to get started, especially in a contract world.
Sure. All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Great questions, everyone. Thanks so much. And Jeff, thank you for joining. What an action-packed presentation. It was riveting. So thank you so much for your time tonight. You're welcome to stay on, listen to the conversation. We have several National Guard members on even with us tonight. My son's in the Guard, and we have you know, almost everyone here has a military background as well, so we can identify with your son and with your family's experience. And I thank you all for your service.
Thank you, and thank you all as well. And I will hang out for a few more minutes. I've got a couple direct messages here in the chat I'll respond to before I drop. So
Great. Thank
I'm
you.
going to stop the recording now.